It's the first Monday in December. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. And today we're going to look at some teams that I think are going to really be fantasy relevant and in reality relevant in the 2020 season and some decisions they have to make. And let's jump right in. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Rays. Okay? First of all, I believe the Rays will win the American League East in 2020. I think with a year of Snell healthy, Glasnow healthy, Brandon McKay, don't forget him, having his first full year after, I'll call it, a cup of coffee in 2019, the Rays clearly, in my opinion, are the cream of the American League East as far as starting pitching goes. The bullpen, I think this is one of the best in Major League Baseball when healthy. And so they have some decisions to make. Their roster, take a look at what they have done and what they have to do by today's deadline. First of all, they have already taken Matt Duffy and Jesus Aguilar. They've designated those two for assignment. They've cleared room on their 40-man roster for at least two slots. Mike Zunino received a 1-year, $4.5 million deal, so he's on the roster. Now, as today's deadline approaches, they have to make a decision on 6 more arbitration-eligible players. One of those is Glasnow. Glasnow enters his first year of arbitration, and the talk around baseball, and what I'm reading in the Tribune from Tampa, is that he will demand about $2 million through the arbitration process. Despite that jump in salary, look, for what he offers, $2 million for Tyler Glasnow is a deal. It may even be a steal, right? So, despite his projected bump in salary, he's still affordable, and he will be tendered on Monday. Now, here's another one. Tommy Pham. Great first season in Tampa. Projected to get a significant raise. Again, I think it's an easy decision for Tampa. I think they tender him a contract. He hit 21 home runs in 2019. He stole 25 bases. He became the first 2020 player for Tampa Bay since B.J. Upton. And over the last 2 seasons, the Rays are 40 games over 500, 112 and 72 when Pham is in the lineup. And I look for Pham to be a 25-25 guy, maybe even more. He has really taken off. He seems comfortable in that lineup. Aggressive hitter, power hitter. Look for them to tender him a contract today. So let's get into some more. The third one, Chaz Rowe could be the most interesting of the group. He could be non-tendered. He had an up and down 2019 season. Okay, now there's also, remember, the 3-batter minimum rule in 2020, which could remove specialists like Chaz Rowe. In 19, Rowe faced a right-handed hitter 174 times compared to just 55 plate appearances against lefties. Now, he is a veteran. That decision is going to be tricky to see if they tender Chaz Rowe. Rowe had a really good second half. Keep your eye on that one. Guillermo Heredia, another possible non-tender option. He's a 4th outfielder, plays behind Kevin Kiermaier. Good defense. He'll have to improve on his 668 OPS from last year. I don't think they tender him. I think he is a free agent after today. Daniel Robertson, a key player on the 2018 team. He battled injuries, including a knee injury last year, regressed last season, found himself playing a lot in AAA Durham. He was able to produce as a September call-up, which is a sign that shows he could return to the form he had during the 2020 season. Now, Robertson still has a very capable bat. He's a very versatile defender, which likely means that the Rays will bank on him and he can bounce back and have a big 2020. I think he's tendered a contract today. I think he's on the roster when opening day starts in 2020. And I don't think he's going to be a very expensive player for the Rays to offer a contract to. So, I look for him to be back on the team. And then finally, the 6th player, Oliver Drake. He was a pleasant surprise in 2019 for the Rays. Yes, he was. A key option on that He had a 3.87 FIP last season. Excellent against lefties. Limited him to a 360 OPS. Now, he's a right-handed pitcher. He'll have to fare better against right-handed batters who hit 8 home runs and finished with an 865 OPS in 97 at-bats. But I think because of his effectiveness against left-handers as a right-handed pitcher, he gets tendered on Monday. So I think Drake, Robertson, Glasnow, and Pham, the 4 who are tendered contracts, I'm going against Chazro. I'm going against Galerio and Heredia. We'll see how it goes Monday as the deadline approaches for non-tendered players. I'm looking at some needs the Rays have. Now, they lost Travis d'Arnaud to free agency. He signed last week with Atlanta. They came to terms with a 1-year deal with Mike Zunino for $4.5 million, including a 2021 club option worth another $4.5 million, potential to grow to $5.25 million with incentives. But I think the Rays are probably still in the market for another catcher. Martin Maldonado could make some sense if Tampa decides to go that route. Michael Perez, also who has some major league experience, could be a fill-in. I just don't know about Zunino. He really fell off the world last year. When Columbus was sailing the 7 seas and the world was flat. When you got to the end, you fell off the edge. Well, that was Zunino last year. He just fell off. And so you're asking a lot, a comeback year from Mike Zunino. I don't know if he has it in him or not in that difficult American League East. And as I said earlier, I think the Rays win the East this year. So we'll see how the catching spot goes for Tampa. I think they're still in the market for another catcher. They're definitely in the market for a right-handed bat. Avisail Garcia is headed for free agency, and the Rays need another right-handed option to replace Garcia's production. Now, Tampa has a lot of roster flexibility. We know that. And a right-handed hitting does not necessarily need to come from an outfielder. It could come from a third baseman, especially if the Rays decide to tender another player. But, look for them to be looking for a cheap right-handed bat with some pop in the free agent season. Other things that have happened already, they have acquired first baseman outfielder Brian O'Grady last week when they designated Jesus Aguilar for assignment. O'Grady came over from the Reds. He hit 2 home runs in 28 games with the Reds last season. Most of his production came at AAA, where he hit a career-high 28 homers. And so, again, they designated Aguilar to make room on the 40-man for O'Grady. Those are some of the things the Rays have done roster-wise so far. They've got a real decision to make at third base. Who's going to be at third for the Rays? I said earlier, Matt Duffy designated assignment last Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. The club was comfortable with their other options. They've got Yandy Diaz, Daniel Robertson, Michael Brosseau serving as right-handed hitters. They also have Joey Wendell, a left-handed bat who can play third. So they have 4 options at third base. There's also prospect Kevin Padlo, one of 5 prospects protected last week by Tampa. Now he'll have to reproduce what he did at AAA Durham last year in order to have a realistic spot at a big league roster position. But the Rays are confident in his ability as well, and he can play first and third base. So there are 5 options in-house. I don't know if Tampa will look outside to try to come up with a third base option. Diaz is probably going to play a lot of first base, especially against left-handed pitching. And Brosseau and Robertson will have to show they are good major league players for an entire season. They have been good over short periods of time. So interesting to see how they handle third base. And, again, Tampa, their heart and soul is their pitching. They've got great pitching coming back. And again, I'm looking for them to win that American League East. So let's move on to another team. Let's go north. Let's go to Boston. I think the Red Sox are in for a tough year in 2020, but a lot will depend on the player I'm getting ready to talk about now. Dr. James Andrews has given the Red Sox ace Chris Sale some good news coming up for the Christmas holidays. Maybe a Christmas present open early, right? Andrews has cleared Sale to begin throwing with the goal of participating in spring training. How about that? That's some news, huh? This was a report that came out today off of WEEI radio in Boston. Sale visited Andrews last week in Pensacola, Florida. and received the green light in a follow-up evaluation stemming from an injection he received in his left pitching elbow last August. Remember now, Sale threw his last pitch August 13 before he was shut down for the remainder of the season with elbow inflammation. Red Sox general manager Brian O'Halloran said at last month's general meetings, let me get that out one more time, general managers meetings, that's a tongue twister, huh? That the rehab had gone really well and Chris Sale was right where they wanted him to be. 2020 season marks the first of his 5-year, $145 million extension that he signed last March. Boy, was Sale not wise in signing that contract? Let's just say he hadn't signed that contract. How many of you in the chat room think Chris Sale could get $145 million over 5 years now? It's $29 million a year, knowing he's got elbow issues. I don't think it ever would happen now. But he did that coming into spring training last year, hot off of a World Series championship. Smart. Now we'll see what happens with Chris Sale, that he's going to begin a throwing program. Here it is December. So, great news for the Red Sox. Great news for Sale. Fantasy-wise, what does this do? I guess we're keeping our eye on Chris Sale this winter, right? What does it do for those who own Chris Sale or might own Chris Sale? Well, we keep our eyes tuned. Spring training will be huge. You don't look for him to get a big workload in spring training for sure, but you do look to make sure he's healthy. So, great news for Red Sox fans. Great news for Chris Sale. And if Boston is to have a fighting chance, I think Chris Sale has got to be a big part of that. So let's look at the teams, maybe a player off each team who is eligible for salary arbitration. The 8 p.m. deadline, Eastern time tonight, clubs having to tender contracts. It presents a number of decisions for a number of teams. We've talked about the Rays. Let's talk about some other teams. Let's go through the East. Let's start there in the American League, and let's go through every team. American League East, Brandon Drury, Blue Jays. Disappointing year in 2019. A 642 OPS and 447 plate appearances. Toronto has a lot of young, talented infielders besides Drury. Likely he will be relegated to a backup utility role. He earned $1.3 million last year. Arbitration eligible for the second time. The Blue Jays have options in Richard Urena, Santiago Espinal, leaving the club with a decision to make on Drury. I think he is not tendered, and I think he will become a free agent. Let's talk about the Red Sox. Sandy Leon, a catcher. He emerged last year as the number one catcher. Christian Vasquez emerged as the number one catcher ahead of Leon. Leon earned $2.475 million last year. Leon is arbitration eligible in the fourth and final time this winter. His 548 OPS was nearly 300 points lower than his best season in 2016. And I say he's gone. He's out of there. Boston will not sign or offer Sandy Leon. Now the Yankees have Chance Adams. Greg Bird was an obvious choice, but they've already taken care of that problem. They designated Bird for assignment on November 20th, clearing a roster spot. Now, you know Chance Adams was once a top pitching prospect. He hadn't been the same since he had bone chips removed in 2017. Non-tendering Adams would not be a cost-cutting move, but rather a way to free up a roster spot for an off-season acquisition, and I look for the Yankees to do just that. Going to the Central Division, Tyler Naquin of the Cleveland Indians. Okay, Danny Salazar, they've already cut ties with him earlier in November. They freed up a roster spot there. Naquin was having a strong year before tearing his ACL in his right knee at the end of August. He's 28 years old. He isn't expected back in action until the middle of the season. Now, I think they'll probably settle with him. I think they'll probably offer him something. Coming off an injury, I think he wants a contract. And I think it puts Cleveland's brass in a superior position to re-sign him. So let's keep an eye on that. I think Naquin will be back tendered before the 8 p.m. deadline tonight. The Twins have C.J. Cron. Cron had a great year for the Twins. He had 25 homers, a 780 OPS, 499 plate appearances. He did have minor offseason surgery on a thumb. It was an injury that bothered him throughout the second half of the season. He's arbitration eligible for the third and final time after earning almost $5 million last year. He will likely get a raise, and I look for the Twins to keep him and tender him a contract. It's still affordable. I don't think it'll go up that much, maybe $7 million. What do you think? But I think the Twins will tender him the contract because he was productive last year and also played first base very effectively for the Twins. Now, here's a team that I predict to win the division, the White Sox. Leury Garcia, basically a utility player. He can play some infield, he can play some outfield. Yolmer Sanchez was the top non-tender candidate, but they outrighted him last Monday after he posted a .638 OPS last year. Leury Garcia, in his final year of arbitration eligibility, didn't do much offensively with a .688 OPS. However, he did score 93 runs, and he did play, check this out, 6 different positions. So it gives manager Rick Renteria a very useful player to plug in a variety of spots. And considering he only earned $1.5 million last year, even if he gets a raise, it won't be significant. Here's the catch. Chicago has so many young players that were coming out of AAA last year. And because of that, I don't expect them to tender Leury Garcia. Nick Madrigal will be up playing the infield. They've got Luis Robert coming up to play the outfield. I look for Leury Garcia to be gone and not tendered a contract for 2020. In the American League West, looking at the significant players there, what about the A's? A lot of news over the weekend about Blake Treinen. Blake Treinen had his breakout season in 2018, and we fantasy gurus know all about that. In 2018, a 0.78 ERA to go along with 38 saves and an all-star selection and some down-the-ballot Cy Young votes. 2018 was an incredible year for Blake Treinen. Okay? However, how about his second half last year? 7.33 ERA in his final 28 appearances, lost his closer role, and remember last year he earned almost $6.5 million. He's arbitration eligible for the third and final time. He is a prime non-tender candidate. Now, he will become in demand if he becomes a free agent. So, might Oakland try to trade him today before the 8 p.m. deadline? I think the answer to that is yes. Now, his value is down, but something is better than nothing. And look for Oakland to trade him before 8 p.m. tonight, Eastern Time. That's what I think is going to happen. Moving on to the National League and looking at the teams there, not a lot of noteworthy names. I do note Maikel Franco is arbitration eligible for the Phillies, and the Phillies are ready to move on. He earned $5.2 million last year. He's entering his third of 4 arbitration eligible seasons. I think they non-tender him, and I think he's gone. I think Philadelphia, they have been talking in the press there, which means where there's smoke, there's a little bit of fire. And I look for Maikel Franco to be out of Philly and not tendered. Another player I look to be non-tendered is Travis Shaw for the Brewers. The Brewers declined their option on Eric Thames. Now, some may think because of that Travis Shaw is the answer at first base. That's possible. But look what he did last year. A .551 OPS in 270 plate appearances. He's 29 years old. He earned $4.675 million last season. No certainty return to the promise he showed 2 years ago. He has 2 years of arbitration eligibility remaining. Expected to get a raise this year. So GM David Stearns has to decide whether Shaw's subpar 2019 was an outlier or the beginning of a trend. I think it's the beginning of a trend. I don't offer Travis Shaw. I let him walk. Milwaukee has some good young players in the minor league system who at least would get a chance if Shaw is out of there. And you got to remember, too, there may be a cheap free agent that they can pick up and bring back. So, remember, this didn't just start last year. He started declining in 2018, near the end of the year. So he's had over a year of decline. Last year, they call up Keston Hiura to play second base, relegating Shaw to the minor leagues. He came back, but never really was what they hoped he would be. So I look for Shaw to not be tendered. Another player, here you go. This is a good one. And you Cubs fans, chip in on this one. Addison Russell. I think he's out of chances and out of time in Chicago. Now, I know he plays shortstop. I know he plays second base. I know he missed the start of the 2019 season, completing a 40-game suspension in violation of Major League Baseball's joint domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse policy. But after that, he continued to struggle at the plate. He had a sub-700 OPS for the second straight year. Remember, 2017 was his breakout year. 2018 and 2019, nothing fantasy relevant. You would not have wanted Addison Russell on your fantasy team. The Cubs also, they have a surplus of second base options, including prospect Nico Horner, who's capable of backing up Javier Baez at shortstop. Russell avoided arbitration with a $4.3 million deal in 2019. He's in his third of 4 arbitration-eligible seasons, and I look for him to play somewhere else in 2020 than Chicago's Northside Cubs. Okay. The Reds, Jose Peraza. A lot of people, including myself, had high expectations for Peraza coming into last year, didn't you? I mean, he'd had a good 2018, and we were expecting some great things out of Jose Peraza. He was unable to do it. He had a .631 OPS in 403 plate appearances. He lost his job, basically. Jose Iglesias came over, was the starting shortstop. Derek Dietrich gave playing time. Peraza earned $2.775 million in the first of his 4 arbitration seasons, so he'll likely earn more than $3 million. The Reds might not want to pay for that for utility infielder. In fact, I'm going to say the Reds won't pay that for utility infielder. The only thing in his favor is they do have 3 years of control over him, and he's only 25. If the Reds decide last season was an outlier and they think Peraza can bounce back, still $3 million would be a cheap price if you're paying that for a starter who has the speed, average, combination potential of Peraza. But if they decide last year was the start of a decline, look for Peraza to not be in Cincinnati and not be tendered by the 8 p.m. Eastern deadline tonight. Here's an interesting one. And I know this guy is a player Lenny just absolutely loved last year, Jake Lamb. Okay? Jake Lamb, third baseman, first baseman too, 2 years removed from an all-star selection. Last year was absolutely brutal. 193 average, 226 plate appearances, and he earned almost $5 million last year. He's entering his third and final year of arbitration. Arizona has a tough call to make. What do you do with Jake Lamb? I think they let him go. I really do. 193? Are you kidding me? And he's going to probably earn over $5 million for a 193 bat? I don't think so. And he's been injury prone. So I'm looking for him to say sayonara when it comes to playing next year in the desert in Arizona. Here's your guy, Kevin Pillar. Yeah. The Giants have 5 arbitration players, none expected to make nearly as much as Pillar, who made $5.8 million last season. Pillar tied for the team lead with 21 homers, but he had a poor .293 on-base percentage. That was the worst for any Giants player with at least 270 at-bats. However, the Giants don't have any other options, really. So I look for them to negotiate a lower salary with the soon-to-be 31-year-old Kevin Pillar. I look for the Giants to retain his services in 2020. And is he fantasy relevant? Well, I think he is. I mean, there were a few games last year where you look in the box score and Pillar's hit 2 homers, 5 RBIs. Obviously, he did that every day, but he had some really good upside in that lineup. And if he is a center fielder and playing every day, he's going to have the opportunity to get those 20-plus home runs again. So I think he's worth a shot, late round draft pick in fantasy, Kevin Pillar, and I think he's going to be a Giant in 2020. Just a few more nuggets of information. Here's a report out today that the Brewers are listening to trade offers for Josh Hader. Now, Josh Hader, relief pitcher of the year in 2019 in the National League, right? He still has 4 seasons of team control before becoming a free agent. But MLB Network insider Ken Rosenthal reports in The Athletic today that Milwaukee is open to trading the 25-year-old left-hander. And there are 2 major reasons why. The first, Hader is arbitration eligible for the first time this offseason as he is a Super 2 player. He's going to get increasingly expensive from here on out and will be at risk of declining after handling such a heavy workload in each of the last 2 years. So the Brewers have to ask, how long will Hader, be Hader? And the worst thing can happen would be if Hader's past workload triggered a decline in his performance as his salary started to rise. The second reason why Milwaukee probably is considering moving Josh Hader is that his trade value at this point in time could be astronomical, especially given this year's weak class of free agent relievers. Now, Milwaukee may be looking for something like the Mets and Seattle pulled off in the Edwin Diaz trade last seasons. Remember, the Mariners sent Diaz to the Mets and received multiple top prospects, Jared Kelenic and Justin Dunn, and they also got the Mets to take on part of Robinson Cano's contract. And at the time of that deal, Diaz had 4 years remaining of club control as well. If Milwaukee could pull a trade like that, boy, that would be a blockbuster, wouldn't it? As we head into the winter meetings. Wow. Now, also out today, this is from The Athletic, Ken Rosenthal, the Phillies are expected to non-tender second baseman Cesar Hernandez. These moves would clear the way for free agent shortstop Didi Gregorius to join former manager Joe Girardi in Philadelphia. Okay, so if they non-tender Cesar Hernandez, that would open up the spot for Didi to be the shortstop in Philadelphia. Look for it to happen. I really think it will happen. And let's talk about the market for Starling Marte. Pittsburgh center fielder. He possibly will be traded this offseason. He's owed $11.5 million in 2020 and can make $12.5 million in 2021 if his club option is picked up. Now, the Mets have reported interest in him, and Marte made it clear he'd welcome a chance to play every day with the club. In an interview that was tweeted last Thursday by Hector Gomez, Marte said, "The Mets have it all. It would be a great opportunity to play with them." So it seems he's interested in going. The question is, are the Mets interested in trading for him? Now, also, the Cubs should have an acute interest for a center fielder, given Albert Almora Jr.'s offensive struggles, a lifetime 85 OPS plus. Almora took a step backward on defense in 2019. And so Miguel Amaya, who I've seen play, a catching prospect, played in the Carolina League this past year, the Cubs' number 2 prospects. Also add in right-hander Adbert Alzolay. And these could be 2 players that the Pirates can ask for in a deal if Marte is shipped off to Chicago. Now, there's another scenario in which Marte could be dealt to Philadelphia. There you go. The Phillies probably want to move on from Odubel Herrera. And they have a right-hander, Eniel De Los Santos, their number 7 prospect, and outfielder Mickey Moniak, their number 8 prospect, who could be trade targets for the Pirates. So, one more nugget. Jim Bowden, current writer for The Athletic, suggests that new Pirates general manager Ben Cherington should call the Dodgers to shop Marte. What about that? If you see Marte play in center, LA could move Pollock to left. And can you imagine Marte at the top of that Dodger lineup? Wow. You never know. And that's what's so great about Hot Stove League. It's all these things we're talking about this morning factoring in what are teams going to do, and it's like who jumps first. We haven't even talked about free agent pitchers this morning because that's another show, and we've had that a little bit in the past. But I think the non-tendering free agents by 8 p.m. tonight, we'll see who might be available there, and then these possible trades. It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy good. So let's keep our eye on it. Hey, that's it for today. It's great being with you. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Thank you for being in the chat room. Lenny, thank you. It's great to be a part of Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports. Thank you for this opportunity, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow morning on Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports.